Tonight, when you get thirsty, you're going to walk over to the sink. You'll turn a handle, crystal clear water will pour into your glass, and you won't give it a single thought. But for 99.9% of human history, that handle didn't exist. When you needed a drink, you went to a river, a pond, or a puddle. And more often than not, that water was crawling with parasites, bacteria, and waste. But modern humans almost never experience this. For over 300,000 years, every single one of your ancestors spent their entire lives in a constant, deadly gamble with dehydration. They didn't even have water filters or boiling instructions for most of that time. Just the natural streams, the weather, and whatever their instincts told them to trust. So, what did they actually drink to survive? The answer changes everything we think we know about evolution, agriculture, and why human civilization exists in the first place. Let's start with fermentation, because fermentation is the reason any of this was possible. The earliest solid evidence of humans intentionally fermenting liquids comes from Jiahu in China, roughly 9,000 years ago. But alcohol didn't just get people buzzed. Fermentation completely restructured the human diet. Before fermentation, our ancestors were like every other mammal. When you were thirsty, you drank from the nearest source and hoped your immune system was strong enough to survive it. Moving into dense, permanent settlements meant turning those water sources into public sewers. Our bodies are terrible at processing waterborne pathogens compared to the animals that live in them. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid, all of them could kill a human in days. Fermentation changed that equation overnight, literally. The process of brewing creates an environment roughly 3% to 5% alcohol by volume. Inside that liquid, deadly bacteria cannot survive. Outside that liquid, you risk a painful death. This is not an exaggeration. Anthropologists studying ancient urban centers have documented that populations without access to fermented beverages or deeply protected deep well systems suffered devastating, routine mortality rates from contaminated water. But here's what's fascinating. Fermentation didn't just protect humans from disease. It gave them something they'd never had before: portable, storable nutrition. Think about this. Before brewing, a water supply could spoil or become toxic in a matter of days if stagnant. Fermentation suddenly added weeks, months, or even years of shelf life to liquid sustenance. And over thousands of generations, those preserved calories changed our species. In 2014, archaeologist Patrick McGovern published groundbreaking research on ancient biomolecular chemistry. He spent years analyzing the chemical residues inside pottery jars from ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian sites, some of the first dense civilizations on Earth. What he found was striking. During the day, about 80% of caloric intake in these early empires didn't come from solid bread, but from a thick, nutrient-dense, low-alcohol gruel. It was essentially liquid bread. Fieldwork, construction, military campaigns, daytime energy was fueled by brew. But at night, around the communal tables, the entire character of drinking changed. It wasn't about quick hydration or basic calories anymore. It was about ritual, shared vessels, tales of ancestors, and establishing laws. McGovern and other evolutionary historians argue that the need to secure grains for fermentation is what actually drove humans to settle down and invent agriculture. The brewery was the original community center, the original courthouse, the original town hall. It's where humans learned to cooperate on a massive scale and organize complex societies. It's where we became civilized. But survival drinking wasn't just about beer and wine in early cities. There was something else happening, something that scientists only fully mapped out in the last 30 years. You were not designed to process fluids the way you do right now. In 2001, biological anthropologists digging into genetic history confirmed a mutation that changed evolutionary science. They mapped the history of a specific gene, ADH4. They found something nobody expected, a massive evolutionary pivot point spanning millions of years. Our primate ancestors carried a version of this enzyme that could only break down alcohol incredibly slowly. But roughly 10 million years ago, when our ancestors transitioned from living in trees to walking on the ground, a single mutation made this enzyme 40 times more efficient. Before this mutation, primates did not consume fermenting fruit. It would rot on the forest floor, and eating it meant dangerous intoxication and vulnerability. But when the environment shifted, the primates who could safely eat the fallen, fermenting fruit survived the dry seasons. This wasn't a vice. This was normal. This was how our evolutionary lineage adapted to scarce food and tainted water sources for millennia. And what did people do with this biological superpower as civilizations grew? everything. A 16th century English physician recorded that a household would consume several gallons of small beer every single day, given to everyone from toddlers to the elderly, because it was the only fluid guaranteed not to cause sickness. People drank it at breakfast. They drank it while working the fields. They drank it to clear their minds of anxieties about contaminated wells. A household manual from the 1500s advised masters that the best way to keep a workforce healthy and productive was to ensure the small beer was never sour and always flowing. Now, modern historians had been reading these references to massive daily alcohol consumption for centuries, but they kept translating it as a sign of widespread historical alcoholism. They couldn't imagine that people drank low-alcohol beverages out of sheer, desperate necessity rather than a desire to get drunk. The modern assumption was so deep that we looked back at history through the lens of our clean, chlorinated municipal water systems. But then biology confirmed what history had been saying all along. In various clinical studies on hydration, researchers stripped away modern sterile fluids and analyzed the hydration efficiency of historical, low-alcohol brews. Within weeks of testing, the data revealed a perfect balance. At low percentages, the fluid provides hydration and vital B vitamins without causing the dehydrating diuretic effects of modern high-proof spirits. Nobody taught ancient humans the biochemistry. Their bodies and survival instincts just settled into the pattern, a deeply embedded survival program that kept our species alive through the dirtiest centuries of human history. So, what killed it? The answer is simpler than you'd think: filtration and chemistry. In the 1800s, scientists like Louis Pasteur finally discovered the germ theory of disease. Cities began installing massive sand filters and treating water with chlorine. The public water supply, which had been a source of danger and fear for thousands of years, slowly became safe. Then came modern water treatment plants, then cheap bottled water in the 20th century. Within a few generations, the daily reliance on fermented beverages to stay alive, a reality humans had known for thousands of years, was completely gone. And here's the part nobody talks about. The word symposium comes from the ancient Greek symposium. It literally means drinking together. In the ancient world, communal drinking wasn't a reckless party. It was a structured safety net. Gathering to drink a trusted, shared batch of fluid was how you knew you would see tomorrow. For most of history, drinking alone or drinking unverified water from an unknown source was highly suspicious, and usually fatal. We conquered the microbes. We flooded our pipes with clean, treated water, and we rightly call that progress. But here's what we forgot. Modern humans are entirely disconnected from the profound vulnerability of basic survival. We have eliminated an entire dimension of human gratitude and community. That deeply ingrained biological partnership with fermentation, which built our first cities and kept our ancestors alive, has been reduced to a weekend luxury or treated like a modern vice. Instead, we look back at the past and wonder how they survived, treating their habits like a historical quirk. But what if it wasn't a quirk at all? What if our ancient affinity for fermented flavors isn't a design flaw? What if it's your body remembering exactly how it kept itself alive? For thousands of years, your ancestors drank in a rhythm dictated by necessity, biology, and trust. They gathered around fermentation vats and built the foundations of modern agriculture. They used their body's unique chemistry to turn a toxic landscape into a habitable world. They lived in an era where clean water wasn't a utility bill. It was a miracle. And every time they lifted a vessel together, they weren't just quenching a thirst. They were celebrating the fact that they had survived another day. We traded all of that for a faucet handle, and most of us never even knew it was gone.